been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tony and Tristan here with the Zero Duck 30 podcast. Today we have on Travis Thompson, and all of my Florida and probably southern marsh duck hunters are going to be familiar with that name. Travis has done a lot of conservation work for not only Florida, but I think a lot of the South, and Delta was actually just honored him at their Delta Waterfowl Convention with the Legacy Conservation Award, I believe is what Travis said it was called. But we're super excited to have him on. He has his organization, allflorida.org, and, is a longtime waterfowler. And Travis, why don't you kind of give everybody a little bit of your background and how you got into waterfowling, man, and conservation?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, fellas. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yes, sir.
Long time listener, first time talker. How about that? Because I know you guys had our buddy Alex Pomerado on a few weeks back, and I listened to that. Alex he's one of the awesome. He's just an awesome dude. But so I'm a fifth generation Floridian. Had my captain's license since 2005. Used to guide just for saltwater fishing. Grew up hunting and fishing. Whatever was in season, we were hunting. Whatever was biting, we were fishing for. And kind of over time, just grew into my love of waterfowl hunting. When I first got heavy into it, it required way less scouting than deer hunting did, and I was able to talk. Mm-hmm. So duck hunting had a lot more appeal because you could sit there and didn't have to be quiet. Mm-hmm. But just grew up kind of doing it all. Like I said, fifth generation Floridian. My family, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. When we went on vacation, we hunted and fished in Florida. That's what we did for vacation.
That's awesome.
So just kind of came by it natural. Grew up. My dad worked for Florida DEP for almost 50 years.
Wow.
So I kind of grew up in a family where we looked at things through a lens of conservation. And one thing led to another. So I've been a full-time guide now for about 7 years. Mm-hmm. I still do a little bit of fishing stuff, not nearly as much as I used to because I focus so heavily on ducks now. But from September to the end of January, I won't pick up a fishing pole. Everything I do will be focused on waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. So
that's awesome.
Full bore all the time.
That's awesome, man. And how long have you, well, first of all, fishing and waterfowl kind of lend together because you're out there fishing and you can't help but you're basically scouting at the same time, especially running up in creeks and stuff, trying to get into redfish and stuff or whatever. But,
you got that right.
But when did you get into waterfowl? How long have you been doing that?
Man, I've been duck hunting my entire life, but I would not say I was a duck hunter until I was in my early 20s. I worked with a guy and we would apply for quota permits over at TM Goodwin and Broadmoor. Mm-hmm. And we both worked in IT at the time. And so we would get, 8, 10, 12 permits a season because they all came out at like 10 o'clock on some Tuesday, and we would have like multiple computers logged in. And I mean, we gamed the system back then. And so I was able to hunt what at the time was probably the premier hunt in the southeastern United States. Mm-hmm. And I was able to hunt it, the season's 10 weeks long. You could hunt it twice a week, Tuesdays and Saturdays through a quota. Between the two of us, we would get, 8 to 10 quotas. And if my dad pulled one or my podcast co-host, his dad, Nate was too young, but his dad would pull one. I got to hunt over there a lot in some really high quality stuff. And that's really when I became kind of into duck hunting because that was the, didn't have a deer lease, didn't have a turkey lease. So, you'd apply for quotas and stuff, but it could get discouraging. Mm-hmm. Waterfowl hunting, you can do it on public land. You can do it on public water. There's a lot of public water around. So again, I've never had a mountain of money to sit on top of. It was kind of nice to me as an opportunity. I could just go on a Saturday morning and hunt. Mm-hmm. I could just go on a Tuesday morning and hunt. So that's really, I guess, probably my early 20s is when we really got into that. I couldn't tell you the exact year, but I had killed ducks before that. I had duck hunted before that. But we were always, like I said, we were always kind of like opportunistic hunters. So mm-hmm. if the ringnecks were in heavy on Kissimmee and my uncle knew where they were, we were going duck hunting that Saturday.
Right.
But if the specks were biting on Istapoga, we weren't going duck hunting. We were going speck fishing. Like it wasn't what we were married to.
Right. Right. Now, so Travis, one of the other things that you do also is I understand you run the #1 outdoor podcast in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So we have Cast and Blast Florida. I think this is year 5 of that podcast. And I do that with a good friend of mine, Nathan Henderson. My dad and his dad were best friends. So he kind of grew up as my little brother I never had. And then my wife is the third co-host there, Emily. She's probably the most beloved co-host. But we started that because at the time there was no one doing podcasts really in the southeastern United States, focusing on hunting and fishing, and no one specifically in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we started it because it was fun. It sounded like a fun thing to do. And over the years, it's really turned into a unique community. It's turned into a cool kind of, we call it an entry point for people to talk about conservation, talk about hunting, talk about fishing. You know, so between the 3 things, you know, I've got the podcast, I've got the nonprofit, allfla.org, and I've got my guide services.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of use all of them interchangeably to try to move people towards conservation. Like that's at the end of the day, my goal is if I can create more conservationists, all the other stuff's going to take care of itself.
For sure.
Yep.
And so the podcast, you know, there's weeks where we will joke around and pick on each other and talk about what's your favorite song when you're driving to the boat ramp in the morning. And then there's other weeks when we will tackle, you know, HR 8167 and the Pittman Robertson impacts and the way funding works. And we try to talk about stuff that matters to us in ways that we'd like to listen to it.
Sure.
And we're not always successful. You guys have probably learned that. You're not always successful, but you just keep trying. You get up every day and do it over again.
Yep.
That's right. And the beautiful thing is you can listen back and say, well, you know, I don't like that I said that, or, you know, I wish I would have done this a little different, which is kind of nice.
Yep.
In our earliest episode, we had one microphone. Mm-hmm. And we would swing it back and forth to each other.
Nice.
and so if you went back and listened, like I don't even know how you could find them. They're out there somewhere. But if you went back and like listen to episode 2 or 3, it's like, and Nate, next up we're going to be talking about Roland Martin fishing, and I'm going to throw it over to you. And then I would literally throw the mic over to him, and it was so bad. But it's like you just keep doing it, man. You just keep doing it, and you learn over time.
You know, you missed a grand opportunity there, Travis. You guys could have been had dubbed in some teal flying by, and you could have been like, "Dude, did you see how fast those?" Swing the mic over to him. Teal.
Yeah.
Flew by.
had the wind as it goes by.
Yeah.
Oh, so bad. But you know, you guys are podcasters. Sometimes we wouldn't be the right distance from the mic.
Mm-hmm.
You'd swing it over and like you'd forget to talk into it. I mean, it was just a comedy of errors.
Yeah.
We launched the podcast, and a week later Irma hit, and we couldn't press publish for 2 weeks because we didn't have power.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was just like everything that could go wrong went wrong over the years, but that's how you learn, is just keep doing it.
Wow.
For sure, man. It's a fun thing. It's kind of crazy. We've been doing it for a little over 4 months now. So you're going to be our 20th episode, and it's crazy how fast time flies. But, you know, just, I was thinking on the way here, the opportunities, like I feel like I've became a better speaker in general in my personal life, just from like podcasting, you know,
Right.
Which is kind of cool.
100%. Like you just get used to talking
Mm-hmm.
and forming coherent thoughts quickly.
For sure.
Yeah, and you'll watch a podcast and or listen to it, and you'll be like, if I say that one word one more time in a row,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a backflip out of this chair right now. I mean, it's just,
You got that right.
But you know, as they say, you're your biggest, you're
Critic.
you're your biggest critic. Yep.
Yep, your own worst critic.
For sure. Well, we're excited to get into some of this conservation stuff, Travis. Really kind of what spawned this, you know, obviously like we're parts of DU and conservation's on any duck hunter's mind really, but talking to Ramsey Russell is really kind of what got me and Tony's, mind spinning. And also, you've probably heard of that Wings Over Waterfowl movie that Chris Dorsey's putting out.
Yeah.
So those two things really kind of got us thinking, man, we all really have to step up as duck hunters. And if you have a platform, you really need to be talking about it. And, we obviously we're not originally from Florida, but we lived in Jacksonville for 9 years and got into duck hunting in Florida, obviously. So Florida, we still spend a lot of time there, and it's kind of heavy on our minds and hearts as far as duck hunting. So that's why we really wanted to have you on to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, because, it is one of those things where, we're doing what we're doing in the industry out of our passion, what drives us and makes us get up every day. But, I kind of related to back when I was in the military. There's folks that have all kinds of functions in the military, right? You got your commanders, you got your officers, you have your enlisted, and everybody serves a vital piece to make the machine go, right? And, it just kind of made me realize that I have a lot more to learn about this industry and the sport that we love and the animals that we go after, and people like you, quite frankly, humble the hell out of me. I mean, sure. I mean, it does. Anytime I see somebody that just boots on the ground is out there doing, I went through your stuff, Travis. It blew my mind, man. I mean, you're everywhere, dude.
I appreciate that, man. We try hard. It's, I think, and I don't know if you have a jumping off point into this, but I think there's a struggle between we want to hunt.
Our partners at Huntwise are offering an exclusive discount for Zero Duck 30 followers. As an elite member, some of the features you'll immediately gain access to are Huntcast, Windcast, peak kill times, property lines, owner information and phone lookup, 250 map layers, unlimited offline maps, 3D maps, social media, and on top of it all, save up to 50% on some of the top hunting brands in the industry. Download and explore the #1 hunting tool set today and save 20% by using code DUCK30.
Like at our base, what I want to do is every morning of duck season, I want to get up and go kill 6 ducks. Mm-hmm. If I got 3 buddies with me, I want to go kill 24 ducks. I want to pick out the drakes, and I want them all to be full plumed, and I want them all to be banded. Like I want it to take 4 hours, but I really want it to be over in about 7 minutes because we got so many birds dumping in. Like we all have this kind of idealistic dream of what we want to do, and that's why we hunt. Like that's the thing that makes us get up. Like let's make no bones about it. The idea is, we measure success in did we kill anything? Did we kill our limit? Did you kill a trophy? Like we have these layers of success that we look through. Mm-hmm. But frankly, there's a little bit of disconnect there in that if we're only worried about going to the woods and shooting our ducks, if we're not worried about the conservation side of the street, mm-hmm. This thing we care very deeply about, it'll probably be around, I'm 45 years old. It's going to be around the next 25 years, right? It's not going away that soon. Mm-hmm. But if we think that's not that long, yeah, like it could generationally begin to fade, and it's already starting to happen. It's already being threatened at a major, major level, particularly in Florida. So my friend Matt Pierce, he's a rancher. He's past president of Florida Cattlemen's Association. Mm-hmm. Ranching has gotten demonized in conservation circles in Florida over the years. And he said for a long time, what ranchers wanted to do is they wanted to close the gate and they wanted to work their cattle. Mm-hmm. And then they went to church with their community on Sunday and they had dinner with their family on Saturday. And they focused really on what happened inside the gate.
Yeah.
Until we open the gate and invite people in to see what ranching is about, how it works, what they actually do for the land, the benefits, the water management, the actual lack of fertilizer they use, the inputs, until they do that, they can't change that story. Right. It's the exact same thing with hunters. we are predisposed to want to go to the woods and chase our ducks, chase our turkeys, shoot our deer, and kind of be left alone. But the time is now that we can no longer do that. We have to engage in conservation and kind of be better stewards of our pastime, not just of our woods and waters, but of our pastime as a whole. And if we don't do that, we are in big trouble.
Man, what a great analogy and way you kind of said that, Travis. And that's kind of something that just hit me and Tony on a whole different level, like I was saying here in the last month or so. Obviously, when you're duck hunting, you're part of DU and Delta and these other things, but we're looking at it like, man, we really want to get boots on the ground and do whatever we can, you know?
Yeah, no, we've already committed to doing some things for the youth season with Mario and a couple other people and stuff that we're going to get down there and we're going to be filming a youth hunt. You know, I want these kids to see them shoot some stuff and have some fun. You know, I want them to see themselves and be able to brag to all their other friends about it, so they'll tell 10 other people about, oh, I saw Tim on there smoke a duck. He tells 10 kids and whatever it was, or, you know, that they gave him a free shirt or, you know, all that stuff. And man, I don't even, it just, again, I just want to listen because I'm just like a robot right now, just all ears.
Well, Travis, what are some of the things that, you know, All Florida, well, first of all, when did All Florida start? And what are some of the things that All Florida is doing for the conservation efforts in Florida?
So All Florida is still starting, so to speak. I mean, we've got 100 plus members at this point. Mm-hmm. I like to say it this way. We have a problem in Florida in that we have sportsmen's groups and we have environmental groups, and we don't have anything that in my mind behaves truly as a conservation group. Mm-hmm. So CCA Florida, great organization, good friends of mine. I trust CCA in Florida. They do really good fisheries work. They focus on fisheries. So when you have a conversation around like a lake management plan and how maybe managing this fish over here has a correlation to, so like Jewfish, Goliath grouper, we want to close down. There was big pushback to keep that closed, even though IUCN said that the species are recovered. We wanted to open them for a limited harvest. We pushed FWC to open for a limited harvest on Goliath grouper. They followed the science on that. Well, that sounds exactly like the scenario in Florida with bears. But CCA Florida is a fisheries organization. They can't make that connection. They can't draw those parallels, and they can't put together a contingent to then go advocate to, hey, if we can open Goliath grouper, why can't we open bears?
Right.
It's the same organization. So the goal with All Florida, I believe conservation includes hunting. Mm-hmm. I believe a lot of times we look at that the other way around. We say hunting is conservation. That's not true the way it used to be. But I think true conservation includes hunting and fishing. Mm-hmm. So I view All Florida as a true conservation organization, meaning there are some environmental groups out there that are anti-hunting. Well, I don't view what they're doing as real conservation because they don't view all aspects of the resource the same way I do. Conservation is the idea of we want to seek the proper use of a resource. Mm-hmm. Preservation is we want to keep a resource from being used. So I'm not going to pick on one, but Center for Biological Diversity, I'll pick on them because I don't love them. CBD doesn't want anyone to hunt. They want to block hunting. That's a preservationist mentality. It has nothing to do with conservation. Right. On the flip side, we have lots of hunting groups out there that are worried about, can we have a bear hunt? Can we have a deer season? Can we get more quota tags? All of those are really good things. I'm on board with all of those things, but no one's looking at the whole board, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And what we are trying to do with All Florida is look at the whole board. So, you know, we've got legislation out there that was passed for the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act. And so Governor DeSantis has appointed commissioners, and this is one of his pet deals is the wildlife corridor. Well, all the people making decisions around it, none of them are hunters. None of them are sportsmen.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get a seat in that room and at that table? Well, if we go in there guns blazing and say, well, we want a seat because we're Delta waterfowl or we're whatever, we don't get the seat at the table.
Mm-mm.
So we have created All Florida as kind of a broader look at conservation in our state with the idea that hunting is decidedly part of conservation. So it sounds overly simplistic when I put it that way, but that's really how All Florida exists in that landscape. It's not truly a sportsman's organization. We view it, our tagline right now is authentic conservation, because we believe that to do real conservation, hunting should be considered. That's not to say if you put a 300-acre conservation easement in downtown, Orlando, I'm not going to say you should have hunting on it. Like, we don't know the logistics of that.
Right.
But hunting should be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I guess, when you guys look at something like that, like you're saying as your base point, really, in a nutshell, what you're saying is we're taking first, we're acting on the environment to make sure that the tadpoles feed the ducks and the ducks feed the eagles and the eagles feed you know what I mean?
Right.
All of that is in place. Then can it accept hunting? Can it accept fishing? And I kind of see where you're talking about, especially when you made that analogy between the fishing and the bear hunting. It's kind of like when you got into the bear part, now there's a gap.
Spot on. And, Florida, I don't want to hang up on bears, but Florida has more bears than any state in the country without a bear season.
Wow.
We're the only state with more than 1,000 bears that doesn't have a bear hunt.
Wow.
And we have 4,000 bears.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought it was closer to 4 now. Yeah.
We have more bears in Florida today than at any point since white settlers landed on the peninsula.
Holy cow.
So really, technically since Hernando de Soto, 1513, we have more bears now than we have at any point in history, and we have 21.5 million people.
Right.
It's time to have a bear hunt. But political pressure on politicians that are generally considered friendly to hunters or are held up by hunters and overwhelmingly supported by hunters, they have zero interest in moving on this kind of thing because they're going to get crushed in the court of public opinion by the environmental side.
Right.
So without looking at what I'll call landscape conservation, overwhelmingly in our private hunting group on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
Question out there, what's the single biggest issue facing hunting, conservation, fishing in Florida in the near term? I forget how I'll word it exactly, but it's close. Overwhelmingly, it was land conservation. Overwhelmingly, because we're developing at such a high rate of speed.
Mm-hmm.
But if we just conserve land and we don't worry about hunters' place on that landscape, if we're not actively seeking it, we're never going to get it back. And without a population to push to acquire access to that land, we're never going to get it. So hunters in Florida make up 2% of the population, 1.8%.
Mm-hmm.
And we gain 1,000 people a day. Even if they hunt where they come from, that doesn't mean they're going to hunt here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this war of attrition going on all the time. And we have to kind of change how we look at the problem. So I'm a strategy guy. We have to change the strategy and how we look at the problem. And what we're doing isn't working. So we need to conserve as much land as we can, to be sure, but we need to be conserving it through the lens of what is conservation, and conservation is seeking the proper use.
Mm-hmm.
So if we conserve 2,000 acres, why can't we run turkey hunts on it? Why can't we run alligator hunts on it? Why can't we run small game hunts on it? Like, the question shouldn't be, why would you? The question should be, why can't you?
Right.
Yeah, and Travis, there was a similar topic brought up on the Dr. Duck Waterfowl podcast with them being out in Texas. They were talking about, when these any new WMAs that are established or new areas like you're talking about, like they were saying that there has to be something that says, they're not talking about the whole WMA or the whole land set aside, but 25% of it, 50% of it where people can hunt on it. Because like you said, once you don't get it, you're not going to get it back because of that attrition.
It's crazy. again, I'll paint in political stereotypes, but generally speaking, in the Southeast, you think Republicans, you think that's the hunting party. Those are the guys that all hunt, this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
If you went into like the Northeast, and I don't know the state specifically, but like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, some states that you would say are fairly liberal leaning,
Mm-hmm.
you can hunt in their state parks.
Mm-hmm.
In Florida, we can't even cross that. Like that's not even a conversation anyone wants to have.
Wow. That's so
And
interesting.
you're talking 3.5, 4 million acres of land in Florida.
Wow.
And I'm not saying I want to turn every state park into a hunting opportunity, but for waterfowl, we get 69 days a year. For deer, you get, I think, 122 days a year, something like. Why couldn't you have some special opportunity hunts on some of those properties? Like we have all this water management district land up and down the state, millions of acres.
Mm-hmm.
Why is any of that closed off to hunters?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are questions that we shouldn't have to fight to get at. We have to fight tooth and nail. We have no political support for it. And until we can build up a team that is willing to kind of be more strategic about how we go about, and I also don't want to be reductive. Like there's guys out there that have fought for years and years and years
Mm-hmm.
to get things open. Like we just got back a hunt in the Panther National Wildlife Refuge in Southwest Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a special opportunity turkey hunt that this year was the first time in 30 some odd years that anyone's hunted in that property.
Wow.
That's a big win.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I don't want to be reductive to it, but it's also not a lot of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the grand scheme of things, what is it? 30 quota permits, 22 quota permits.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not knocking it, but we've got to make 10 of those happen a year.
We deserve more than a bone.
For sure.
Yeah. And that's again, I don't want to knock it because that took blood, sweat, and tears from guys like Mike Elfenbein and some of that crew. Like they poured their heart and soul into reopening that for a long time and fought day after day after day for it. So it's a big deal, but we need more, and we need a lot more. You know, we can't market and recruit more hunters because where are we going to put them?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have enough hunters to have a sustainable hunter population that's representative.
Mm-hmm.
So are we just in this death spiral, or how do we fix that?
Right.
I think the way to fix it is we got to get more opportunities, we got to get more access, and we need to be marketing to recruit more hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Travis, let me ask you this, and this might be a dumb question, but I just something that Tony was saying. He mentioned, Illinois is a state where you can hunt. There's state parks, and that's where we're originally from, and we're big bow hunters and stuff. But, with Florida being such a state that taxpayer dollars are, it's such a tourist-driven state. Is it one of those things versus like Illinois that has a lot of their, hunters are a big chunk of income coming to the state of Illinois, so they might be a little bit more inclined to let people hunt those state parks and, move on some of these things for hunters. But a state like Florida that gets so much tax revenue from, all these out-of-staters coming in from Disney and all these other places, the beaches and stuff. Is it one of those things that's another battle affecting Florida hunting, or is there not a correlation?
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I'll say it with more words.
Okay.
The hunting exists for a couple of reasons. You either have a right to hunt and fish, which some states do, or hunting is viewed as a viable management tool by whatever conservation agency is in charge of your state. So you have too many deer, you have whatever, and you can generate revenue off of selling deer tags, and people can hunt them. And so it keeps it in check. It's a revenue generator for the state. Like those are the reasons hunting exists. Not historically, hunting exists so you can get food.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2022, that's why hunting exists. So if you look at a state like Florida, most state wildlife agencies are largely funded through license sales, both hunting and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
You pay in Florida, I think your hunting license, let's say it's $18-20 a year. I don't know. I get one of those packaged things, so I don't know what it is individually, but I think it's $18.50 a year
Mm-hmm.
for a hunting license. That money goes into a fund for the state.
As waterfowlers, we experience all kinds of extreme weather conditions. Stay bone dry and warm with Frog Togs hunting gear. You can check them out at frogtogs.com or at frogtogshunt on Instagram.
Then you've heard of the Pittman-Robertson tax, which is an excise tax on guns and ammo and archery equipment. That money gets paid by the manufacturer into a fund at U.S. Fish and Wildlife and then gets apportioned out to the states based off, among other things, the number of hunting licenses sold.
Okay.
So in Florida, we have 220,000, 240,000 hunters. We get X number of dollars back per hunter from the feds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the old term, hunters pay for conservation.
Mm.
In most states, that's enough to fund the wildlife agency. In Florida, when FWC was formed, so before it was FWC, it was Game and Fish Commission, GFC,
Mm-hmm.
and that was back in the 90s, 80s, 90s. It was largely funded through hunting and fishing licenses. We changed that and we created a dock stamp that goes onto the sale of every house.
Okay.
And that dock stamp goes into a state fund that helps fund FWC.
Oh, okay.
Then we also created a gas tax. There's a state gas tax. So all those 130 million tourists that come to Florida,
Uh-huh.
they have a rental car, they're paying for Ubers, there's a gas tax on that goes to help pay for FWC.
That's awesome.
So FWC's annual budget this year was around $460 million.
Mm-hmm.
Hunting license sales was worth $7.4 million.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
So juxtapose that with a state, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say for a state like Mississippi,
Uh-huh.
their state wildlife agency budget, don't hold me to this, but it was something like $95 million, and $75 million of that came from hunter and fisher numbers.
Wow.
So we're already very insignificant in the grand scheme of things in Florida
Mm-hmm.
as far as what our dollar contributes.
Right.
And Florida doesn't have a right to hunt and fish. So why keep us around if all we're doing is paying to keep the lights on for the hunting and game management division? And the governor's going to get a headache if he turns a bear hunt on because all the anti-hunters and heck, a lot of people that aren't anti-hunting, they just don't like the optics of a dead bear,
Right.
are going to call the governor's office and blow them up. It becomes this really tedious problem. So in a state like Illinois, where you have huge funding coming from license sales and federal dollars coming back to the state,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're going to be okay with opening hunting because it's a revenue stream. In
Gotcha.
Florida, it's such an insignificant revenue stream. Although I would make the argument, me, Travis, I'm a homeowner. I drive a car around, so I'm paying gas taxes. I'm paying real estate taxes and everything else. But I'm also paying fees on top of that to hunt and fish. I would like to see those dock stamps, those gas taxes be used not just to manage non-game stuff, but also to manage game stuff. Like some percentage of that should also come over to the hunting side of the house.
Right.
And I think we'd see that budget swell a little bit and we could see more marketing, more recruitment going on.
For sure.
Travis, how often, because, I'm just sitting there, my mind's spinning, like you said, from, like a fix the problem point of view. How often, if any, do you guys I could see waterfowl resources piggybacking off of the fishing resources, which is the number one stream of outdoor revenue in Florida. Is there correlation there with money cross-funding, because fishing is driving the sales and fishing boats and all that stuff, or no?
Mild. So there's the habitat argument, right? If money goes to fund, let's say, gopher tortoises. Gopher tortoise, if your listeners aren't familiar, is a terrestrial turtle. It's a tortoise that lives in sand pines and uplands. If money goes to fund gopher tortoise restoration and studies and habitat, that's going to benefit bobwhite quail It's going to benefit white-tailed deer. It's going to benefit Florida black bear. So there's an ancillary benefit there in that habitat is also used by game species.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that we see it from a fishery side with access because there's Pittman Robertson on the hunting side. The kind of similar act on the fishery side is called Dingle Johnson. Then it was called Wallop Bro because those were the names of the senators that promoted it. And now it's called the Sport Fish Restoration Act. That act pays for quite a few boat ramps in Florida. Like most new boat ramps, most boat ramp maintenance, a lot of that comes through sport fish restoration dollars. So as a waterfowl hunter, I benefit from sport fish restoration. Like even if I wasn't a fisherman, I would benefit from fishing licenses buying those ramps because it's opening the access for me to get on the lake.
Right.
That's probably the closest correlation where you see some benefit that's ancillary from another division.
I gotcha. As far, we're talking about conservation and kind of some of the challenges Florida's facing. What are some exciting things to look at as far as like Florida waterfowl? Is there anything that off the top of your head that you're looking at and you're saying, man, that's a great thing for the waterfowl community here?
Delta waterfowl showing up in Florida is a great thing.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I get excited about is we're starting to see, how do I say this well? We're starting to see less tribalism,
mm-hmm.
And more teamwork, which I think is the only way we have to go forward.
For sure.
So, we personally, like Travis, has partnered with Matt Pierce and some of the cattle ranchers to run waterfowl programs on leases that have not been hunted. So we're seeing an increase in opportunity. Like that's a big deal. And we've pushed really hard to keep the affordability of that low so we could get more people out there, because then they get to shoot ducks, but they also get to see that agriculture is beneficial to Florida.
Yeah.
It's keeping houses off the landscape at the bare minimum, but in reality, there's best management practices in ag where you can cross fence. So you move your cattle around to actually improve water quality as it filters across a pasture. Because don't think of this as like, your Kansas pastures or your Oklahoma pastures. These are basically swamps where these cows, we call it swimming cattle some days when they got to go get them out, because you'll be riding a horse and your boots will be in the water. So these properties are managed in a way so that they are using the best management practices to also clean water and benefit not just the cows and the rancher, but that's where you see the panthers. That's where you'll see tortoises. That's where you'll see endangered snail kites and caracaras and roseate spoonbills and wood storks. And all these species that have kind of come back in Florida, we see them on ranches way more than we see them anywhere else. And it's because the cattle ranchers are managing that land. So I think that's an encouraging thing. And I think also like the cohesiveness, my wife would tell you the only thing I'm really good at is team building. The cohesiveness of over the years of doing this, we now have a lot of trust, a lot of relationship with Coastal Conservation Association of Florida, American Sportfish Association, those guys on the ground in Florida, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, Delta, Safari Club, National Shooting Sports. We've put together this team that when an issue comes up is willing to say, yeah, we're on this team, which has been a thing that's been missing for a long time and has been missing without any real. If Travis forms, my dad ran the Polk County Beagle Club because he used to run dogs with beagles. It was great. That's a great club, but it had like 22 members in it. There wasn't any real power there.
Right.
There's a power in having Delta Waterfowl and Safari Club and National Shooting Sports lined up next to you.
For sure.
And I don't mean that as reductive to the Polk County Beagle Club. I'm picking on them because they don't even exist anymore. But we have a lot of little organizations, Friends of Lake Istapoga, they don't carry the weight to be able to move the needle that sometimes you can get when you build a bigger team.
Right.
And so if I'm looking at things that are encouraging to me, I'm seeing opportunities for partnerships. I'm seeing creativity in how we're going about those partnerships. And we've got some stuff that we're working on with the Farm Bill reauthorization comes up next year, and that's going to enter into money that gets reallocated back out to ranchers. And we've got some things that we're trying to play with in there to increase access for hunters and get ranchers paid through federal subsidies for allowing hunting on their property. Like, we've got some creative stuff that we're really working on with some of these organizations that I'm hopeful, we're not going to win every fight, but at least we're going to suit up for them.
That's awesome, man. And a couple of things I wanted to touch on out of what you said. The first thing is we've always felt like, because Tony and I, we hunt Florida as much as we can, but we also go to states like Arkansas and, other different waterfowl states, and of course our home state of Georgia. But compared to, let's just talk about, I know Georgia's not the same situation as Florida, but I feel like Florida does a really good job. We've always thought of managing some of these, opportunities, like, you can, like a place like TM Goodwin, for example, or Broadmoor, or STAs or whatever, they record the number of birds shot, the species. So, even if you only pull out once or twice a year, that you're going to have a good chance of shooting 3, 4, 5 birds per hunter, which I think is really unique. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, compared to other states, is like Arkansas does a similar subsidy thing with farmers. We actually pulled a tag last year, and it's basically with the rice field. It's called the W Rice program. You may have heard of that, but
yep, that's part of the program that we're looking into.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's, when you said that, that's exactly what I thought about, because that is a good we've been boots on the ground and seen it and had success in that environment in Arkansas.
Yeah, you're spot on. People sleep on hunting in Florida.
I agree.
Because everyone wants to fish in Florida, and we don't have big deer. Now, through marketing and YouTube channels and everything else, people are going to hunt the Osceola turkey to extinction, I'm convinced, because everybody's got to come here to get it. But I love it because they are getting out in my woods and seeing my Florida the way I see it. I love that.
Yeah.
But, historically, Georgia is a little bit of a flyover state. Like, you guys kill a ton of wood ducks, and on the right day, you can kill a ton of ducks, period. But it's kind of a flyover state. If you look at the map of the United States and you look at the eastern seaboard, coming from the Outer Banks, if you draw a line straight down, you come to Merritt Island, Florida. And historically, if birds went over open water, that's where they came in.
Wow.
Like, if you went back 50, 60, 70 years, that migration route has always existed. So, and then if you go the other way, if you go the Mississippi Flyway, when teal hit the Gulf Coast, a lot of our blue-winged teal, they believe now, come from the Prairie Pothole region. They come from the Central Flyway, even though we're an Atlantic Flyway state. So we get birds that come from all over. I would argue, I've hunted a lot around the South and Central United States. I would argue that those hunts you mentioned, Merritt Island, Goodwin, Broadmoor, and the STAs, are among the best public land hunts you can get in the United States. And like, they are, I'm not saying they're the best, but they are among the best if you like to duck hunt and you like to shoot a variety of birds.
You totally hit the nail on the head with that, because we go and hunt states like, and I'm sure you've been to other states too, where you have like bird purists, like mallard purists, and we tell them, like our good buddy that runs an outfitter out in Arkansas, we tell him, next weekend we're gonna be down there shooting ringnecks and teal with alligators around, and he's like, y'all are crazy. And we're like, yeah, we would love to,
Yeah, I think we should take on maybe I should come up with a new shirt that says blue-winged teal purist.
Yeah.
Seriously, because you know what? I was just telling somebody the other day, I go, you guys chase those green. I get it, man. They're a beautiful bird, especially when you connect with a good northern, big old thick bird, but you get about 2, if you're lucky, 4 weeks, 2 week, maybe at the end of the season, to shoot a fully plumed blue-winged teal. And you can't do that anywhere else in the United States. I mean, very, very very limited areas you can do that in the United States, but Florida presents one of the best opportunities in North America.
For sure.
Outside of getting out of the United States, so.
Right.
And the first time I ever laid eyes on one was a wounded one, and it wasn't something that we'd wound. We actually were coming out of our spot, and we looked down this little hole, and I said, I thought it was a decoy. It was so pretty, dude. I mean, I'd never seen a bird look like that. So when I got the opportunity to shoot one during a veteran hunt, it was like, yo.
Listen, folks, it's a known fact that having motion in your decoy spread is going to increase the likelihood of you having success. Over at Mojo Outdoors, they have a product for every type of environment you're going to hunt in. For example, if we're hunting Florida, we might use a blue-winged teal spinner and the coot rippler. If we're hunting in Arkansas, it's probably the king mallard or the spoonie. With that being said, check out Mojo Outdoors.
Mallard purist, check this out.
Yeah.
I mean, you only get a limited time to be able to get those babies.
Yeah, and Travis, I'm sure you'll have some good input on this too, but back to why Florida's a slept-on hunting state, like I think with the opportunity to go on any given hunt and shoot a whistling duck, a mottled, and a blue wing, fully plumed, in mid to late January, I think that's a pretty unique opportunity to shoot those birds,
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. There's nowhere in the United States that is as consistent with both fulvous and blackbellies as Florida is. I know Louisiana's getting more of them, and they're gonna take over everything in the world. Like they're just such. They breed like 2 or 3 times a year. They're really prolific. Yeah. We'll be banding ducks in September before early teal season, and blackbellies will have chicks like too small to catch and band.
Wow.
Like they'll have at least 2 clutches a summer, and sometimes they'll have 3. I mean, they are prolific breeders. You'll see them sometimes they'll have 10, 12, 14 babies with them.
Wow.
Not dump nested. Like they will hatch just massive clutches. So they'll take over everywhere, but they adapt really well to urban settings. Mm-hmm. I hate hunting them because they don't work.
Right.
Like I'll be a little bit of a duck hunting purist there. Like I like being able to make a call and make a duck do a thing with the call. Yeah. So I get that from the mallard guys. Like that's really what it's about when you're out in timber or rice field or whatever is, can I make a duck react to a call? And we, obviously we can do that with models, but we can only kill one. Mm-hmm. But you got the blackbellies, you got the fulvous. There's nowhere in the United States where you're going to consistently kill those outside of really, if anyone's listening to this and they want to come to Florida and hunt them, don't book a guide, get an STA permit. Yeah. I promise you, your odds are higher getting an STA permit. It's just, that's the spot to kill a fulvous whistling duck if you want to kill one. Model ducks are easy to kill. They're everywhere. And then like you guys mentioned, like we have some pretty tricked out stuff when the season, once it hits January, you start to see, we call them mohawks on those blue wings, where they get that white line that like comes all the way back down their head.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And they get almost like wood ducks where every one you pick up, you're like, dang, should I get this thing mounted?
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I've got 3 in the freezer already to mount. Maybe I shouldn't get, 4 of them mounted. But every one of them, it's like when you pick up a wood duck, like a Drake wood duck, every one you pick up, you're like, God, this thing looks like it was hand painted.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how those blue wings look, man. They all look like they were hand painted. And anyway, it's special. I love it more than any place on the planet. You got to be okay with the suck, which I think most duck hunters are okay with that anyway. I mean, how many guys do you know that go out and kill 6 ducks every day, 69 days?
Right. Yeah. Not
like
very many.
Not that many. So you got to be okay with the suck that you even duck hunt. Florida's hot. There's mosquitoes. There's alligators. There's snakes. There's, I've had sharks take ducks out of decoys before. I've had manatees get tangled up in my lines. Like, yeah, we had a bunch of bull sharks one time. They were small. They were all like 3 or 4 feet, and they would come up and take the ducks that we were shooting. We were shooting divers on the coast, and they would come up and take the ducks out of our decoys. And I was like, oh my God.
Well, that makes sense because that's a big area for baby sharks is up in the mangroves, up the coastal areas.
It's exactly right. But it does make you think twice, like when you walk out there to pick up your ducks.
Yeah.
About to have jaws unfurled here.
Travis, I'm sure you get this question a lot, being that you got a guide service or an outfitter service. And we talked to these guys in the Mississippi Flyway, and they're like, "You are nuts to duck hunt with gators around." And I've had gators eat. We've had gators eat our birds. I think pretty much every Florida duck hunter has had that happen. But have you ever had like a gator get aggressive with you? Because I haven't ever had that happen.
So, no, I'll say no. I've kicked 2 gators. Both were small. Yeah, I say small, 5-6 feet. Mm-hmm. But both were small, and they were as scared of me as I was of them. Mm-hmm. I had one public land. It was a myrtle head. It got blown out by Hurricane Irma, but it was a myrtle head, and there was a hole in it, like where it had gotten blown out, and no one would run their boats in there because it was just stupid to do so because it was rough on your boat. And so I sent it in there, and I mean, we killed like 200 or 300 ducks out of this hole one year. So wow. What we did is we took dove stools in there and set them under the myrtle trees, and we just left them in there. Like we'd be back in 3 days. Mm-hmm. And I went in there one morning, and there was about an 8-footer, and he was on top of my dove stool in that hole.
What?
Yeah, and he got so used to us shooting the hole, like he basically was tamed. Like he would not leave, and I felt bad because I'm like, you don't want to condition a gator to be used to people. Right. Like you want them scared of you. So that was bad. Like we had to move out of that hole for a while, and I'm sure he got dispatched during gator season the next year because I dropped a pin or 3 to several guys that had permits. I've had lakes that I quit hunting because the gators, particularly in early teal when it's hot, you shoot the first time or you set your decoys up and it gets daylight and they're lined up like labs around your decoys.
Holy cow.
Like you'll have 3 to 5 of them just kind of, in a half circle around your decoys. And so then it's like, hey, you're not putting a dog in there. Yeah. I'm not wading in there.
Yeah.
But so we were in a boat blind. How am I going to get to that duck before that gator gets it? So you shoot 6 or 8 ducks, your group does, and you don't get any of them. Well, that feels kind of like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like it's fun to shoot, but I'm not getting any of the birds back. And really all I'm doing is feed these gators, which is just training them to continue to eat ducks. Mm-hmm. So, I've never had one that was like coming after a dog. The ranchers I've worked with have had them charge guys on horses before.
Wow.
But I've never had one. And we've had them, the ranchers have had them take cattle dogs. They had one gator take a couple of cattle dogs. But in those cases, it's on private land. They can get a private land nuisance permit and remove the gator.
Right.
So when we see one on private land, when we see one that gets big enough to be a problem, and this is the thing about gators, big ones are never that aggressive. Like a 10-foot gator is not going to chase your top water bait when you're fishing. Mm-hmm. A 5 or 6 foot gator is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's something in them like that size. They need to show off. They need to front off a little bit, and so they'll kind of get after stuff. They'll show up and chase a dog. A big gator is a smarter hunter. Mm-hmm. Like they'll be stealthy about it. I'm not saying they wouldn't take your dog or take a kid or take a person if they could, but they're way more stealthy about it. They're not as aggressive. That 5, 6, 7 footer is the one that'll kind of show out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And if you get one of those around, and there's a big bull, he's going to take care of him anyway. Right. Like he'll kill him. But if you get one of those around and we see it, we can get permits or tags and get rid of that gator.
It sounds a little bit like just about every species of everything, including humans, like that 22-year-old guy that's like, all bucked up, or maybe that like 3.5-year-old deer that's, chasing the doe until the big boy comes around.
Yep. Or the bigger ones have access to all the good stuff, and I got to get whatever I can while I can, but, Travis, I can't go without saying this until I gotta say it before my old mind forgets again. And that is, we inadvertently talked about how black bears applied to a lot of things here. We've been talking about crazy things you see when you're out there hunting. waterfowl in the state of Florida. No shit. Tristan and I are in a canoe, public land. We're on this water.
Oh yeah.
We're sitting there, just going along through all these lily pads. It's one of those places that is the duckiest place you ever saw. And you just sit there and pray to Lord on your knees and say, why have they not come here? Because all the food is here. It just, why? Well, we're sitting there doing that. And I look up and I start noticing that we're surrounded, like the edge of this whole waterway is surrounded by live oaks. And I'm looking and I see all these dead branches. And it's just real consistent at about 10, 15 feet. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, dude, something is just killing off these, like a significant amount of trees. And then I see part of a tree moving. And then I start looking a little closer and I'll go, okay, there's the source. There's a black bear up in the tree right above us, sitting there chowing acorns down.
Dude, that's awesome.
I'd never seen a black bear. Of course, I know they go in the trees, but I'd never thought about them feeding in the trees. Mm-hmm. This bear had taken out 200 yards, probably. And who knows how long, maybe 2 days. I don't know. But it got to a certain height of which ones it wanted and just was scarfing them. And I was like, well, you don't see that in Illinois.
No.
File that under stuff only duck hunters see.
Yeah, for sure.
And also file that under. I have a whole list of places like you described that is full of duck food and no ducks. So if you need any pins that just look pretty, they look right. I have literally thousands of mornings spent in places like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk about that since we've been on the subject about duck hunting. I mean, one of the common problems with Florida, at least any Florida duck hunter will tell you, is we got too much water. You could argue that. We do have all these great resources, but sometimes there's just too much water, right? Or no? Or are we just lacking the waterfowl?
So here's my pro tip. Okay, this is my pro tip as a guy that for years only guided on public water. That's legal in Florida. You can guide on public land. Yep. I tell people all the time that are getting into it in Florida, learn what ducks in Florida will eat. So you mentioned the mallard guys a minute ago. Like, what they're going to eat in flooded timber. Mm-hmm. You know what they're going to eat in a rice field. Like, why they're there.
Yep.
That's easy to rule out. What's much harder is, so there's lily pads. There's like, I don't know, 30 varieties of lily pads. There's fragrant water lily, and there's spatterdock, and there's Mexican water lily, and they have different blooms, and they have different preferences among ducks as far as a food source goes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a time of year in Florida when wood ducks. So you know how acorns will switch years?
Yep.
Like you'll have years where you don't have a good mast with acorns. There's a time of year where wood ducks will switch exclusively to spatterdock in Florida.
And eat the
so
tubers?
If you want to, yep. Well, there's like a little seed at the base of the flower. Like if you disassembled that, it's like a yellow and red flower. If you disassembled that, there's like little seeds there. And I've actually shot wood ducks. You know how you shoot a wood duck and you toss him in the boat and acorns come out of him?
Yep.
I've shot wood ducks, tossed them in the boat, and those little yellow seeds come out of them.
Wow.
So there's a time of year where I know that I need to find spatterdocks and find spatterdock that's blooming. And you can actually see where the wood ducks are going to feed based off the cutoffs on the flowers in the lily pads.
Wow.
You know that they're in this area, you know that they're using this lake or whatever, but there will be a line somewhere on there where you will see that they have eaten those seeds to the point where you know where they're going to be the next morning.
Wow.
So I scout hard for food, which is why I have spent plenty of mornings sitting in places where there were no ducks. For us, it's hydrilla.
Yeah.
It's Cara, which is a macroalgae that kind of looks like hydrilla. It's eelgrass. It's widgeon grass. It's spatterdock. It's acorns if you can find them. It's smartweed, which is a native little marshy plant. I spend way more time as a botanist roaming around looking for stuff like that and then figuring out how the birds are going to use it. But something else we've learned is, so there's a study, and I'll be wrong, I'm not a scientist, but it's pretty close. There's a study out there that they've looked at the caloric value of hydrilla, and in some cases, hydrilla's kcal value to a duck is greater than corn's.
Wow.
I've actually read that. I think it's there's actually a report put out by the University of Florida.
Yeah. The other side of that is ducks, like,
Do you want coffee that doesn't suck? Get the Duck. Dirty Duck coffee is made specifically for the waterfowl enthusiast. Enjoy flavors like Morning Wood, Dark Dynasty, Cinnamon Teal Snickerdoodle, and First Flight to unlock the flavor that you'll enjoy in the blind for years to come. Our friends at Dirty Duck Coffee Company are now offering all Zero Duck 30 followers a 15% discount when you use code ZeroDuck15 on your next order.
when you and I go to McDonald's, we pig out and we're like, oh, this is delicious, I want to eat here again. But we feel kind of empty a little while later because it's really empty calories. Mm-hmm. And when we go to Ruth's Chris and we eat a 32-ounce porterhouse, we're like, oh my God, that's the best protein I've ever eaten in my life. Ducks are really kind of the same way. So if you have this really nutrient-rich lake, you have the plants growing really fast, you may have hydrilla growing really pretty in it that's a lower caloric hydrilla than a smaller patch in a different lake that has a higher calorie. Well, the ducks know and are going to end up concentrating wherever the higher calorie value is. Now, I have no idea what to do with that information, but I think that's the reason you will sometimes see a lake that's, in our case, a lake that's blanketed out with hydrilla with 200 ducks on it versus another lake that has like 4 patches of hydrilla with 5,000 ducks on it.
Mm.
Wow.
Interesting.
The hydrilla on the second lake has a higher caloric value. The ducks have figured it out, and that's where they're going to stay. And so those are the ducks, you hunt them, they fly off, they're coming back because they know that that food is a higher caloric value. Huh.
Well, one thing, with waterfowl in Florida that I definitely wanted to ask you because of your experiences, last season, it was, you probably know about it. There was a big cold front probably around, I don't know, second or third week of January. And it was like the coldest push of weather that had been through Miami since 2008, I think. And we hunted TM Goodwin actually on that weekend, and we also hunted a spot in Georgia. And so we hit Georgia on Sunday on the way home, but a spot that we know, and then we hit TM Goodwin on Saturday. And it was the most stale birds. We thought for sure, it was just going to be a nice, good push because it was the coldest, arguably the best cold front in years. And it did not seem to affect the birds like that. So I wanted to ask you, do you think Florida is a state where these birds just come and they're here for the year? Or do you think that versus like other states, for example, like Arkansas, when Missouri freezes up, you're going to see an absolute bloodbath in Arkansas? Do you think Florida, have you seen that happen with cold fronts in Florida?
I don't think we get the same type of weather-driven birds that we used to get. Mm-hmm. I think so a couple of things. One, you've got all birds are photoperiod migratory, meaning that there's some dependence on day length. Mm-hmm. Blue-winged teal, the second it flew, we had blue-winged teal in our field August 6th last year.
Wow.
They knew it was coming and they came. Wow. There was no weather pushing blue-winged teal from Canada to come to Florida. They just, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. When you talk about the Midwest birds, you talk about mallards and things, what's going to move birds? Food, safety, or sex, mm-hmm. right? Like that's the big three. They're kind of like me. Like those are the things that I worry about in life. So they're gonna if there's food and it's not locked up, those birds are gonna stay as long as they're safe. Right. You put enough pressure on them. If there's food, they'll flip to nocturnal. Mm-hmm. As long as that food's not locked up. Like we see that a lot in the Midwest, right? That suddenly your mallards and pintails are using a bean field or whatever, and you put some pressure on them and then they go nocturnal. They get stale. Mm-hmm. So I think in Florida particularly, what we see is a couple of factors. One, I think the way we hold water has changed over the years. So I think we are short stopping, and I hate that word, but I think we are short stopping divers further up the state. If you're familiar with Payne's Prairie, just south of Gainesville, that area holds a tremendous amount of water now, and you can drive down Interstate 75 and see 1,000 ducks from the road and probably 5,000 coots. Those birds stop there. There's no reason for them to move. They've got plenty of food, they've got plenty of water, and they've got safety.
Mm-hmm.
Used to, it didn't hold water the same way, so those birds ended up in Okeechobee. Those birds ended up in the STAs. Those birds ended up in Apopka. They ended up in other places. So I think what we are seeing is birds get here, they'll trade around a little bit, but we don't see the weather pushes. We don't see the weather pushes, whether they always happened or not, because we've got other places for the birds to be.
Right.
So we're never getting birds that are moving here because something's locked up necessarily, unless they're jumping over Tennessee, Georgia to get here. Like, how often is Georgia going to lock up?
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Like, you're going to get snow flurries once a year or something. Like, it's not going to get that cold for that long to where it forces its birds down. But you don't have as much water as we have in as many places as we have it. So I think the birds get here migratory wise based on photo period. And I think, there is some weather dependency within photo period. Like, there's a reason ringnecks don't come on the solstice in September. They come in November.
Mm-hmm.
And it's somewhat weather driven. But I think we've materially changed the way the water works down here. And so add that into the vast majority of birds hunted in Florida are residential birds.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is if you went down the list of the top 6 species killed, I would guess you have blue-wing ringneck. So those are both migratory species. And then I would guess you have mottled duck, wood duck, black-belly whistling duck.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 of those top 5 are residential ducks.
Yeah.
They live here year round. You go hunt mottled ducks, which are a dumb duck. Like they will respond to a call. You can shoot at them and you can call them back. Like if you shoot the hen, you can call the drake back every time. Like they're just not that smart. Black-belly whistling ducks are not smart ducks. The best decoy for a black-belly whistling duck is to shoot one. If you can get one on the water, you can kill them all. Like they're just dumb. But those ducks are still going to be susceptible to pressure. So you look at a spot like Goodwin. Yes, you'll get teal that bounce, back and forth a little bit in the winter. So again, you look at a front like you're talking about, there may have been teal there that got pushed out by the front.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved 100 miles south, and there were no teal 100 miles north to move in.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So I think it's more of a trading game than anything else when it comes to Florida ducks at that point in the year with weather. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get caught in the same trap every year. I'm like, oh dude, this weather, we're gonna just be slap loaded with birds.
Uh-huh.
And then I sit down and think about it. I'm like, where the heck are those birds gonna come from? Like, are they just gonna teleport here because they weren't here? Like, it's not like they're staged up in Ocala someplace and they're gonna magically appear in Clewiston 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not coming because I don't know where they're going to come from. And so when you look at it pragmatically, it kills some of your hopes and dreams, but also you also don't know. You get a front that comes through and then you get that little warming trend after. We've had blue-winged teal show back up after we thought they were gone.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm convinced those teal bounced back north.
Right. A little reverse push going on.
Yeah. Like, why wouldn't they? I mean, it's a bird. You get up 200 feet in the air. You can see a long way. Oh, that looks like food over there. Let's go do that. I mean, it's a duck at the end of the day. It's not that smart. We're giving it a lot of credit for knowing calories and knowing safety and everything else, but it's still a duck at the end of the day.
Right.
Right. Well, Travis, and this wasn't on the outline, and it's just came to my mind, and I gotta know if you know anything about this or if there's any movement going on with this. And that is, we've on a lot of recent podcasts, we were talking to Sean Weaver about South Dakota and how, I would call it a good old boy state, where it's still like when I grew up, you went over to somebody and said, hey, can I come help bale hay for the summer, an opportunity to be able to deer hunt there, or can I help fix fence, or, that kind of thing. And that stuff is still real life up in the north. I tried to take that to Florida, and I saw a corporation in my face. Every place I looked down central to south central Florida is just consumed by corporations that own thousands and thousands and thousands of cropped acres. I've seen birds some of these cropped acres that border some of these places we've been talking about. We had a great hunt one time because some guy in what do you call those, like bicycle plane things that fly through the air?
He had like an air fan on the back with a parachute.
Dude, he kept going over on this private land and busting up all these ringnecks, and I'm like, dude, that's the most ringnecks I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
But they were over there, and I'm sitting there looking at that going, God, opportunity for waterfowlers. Is there anything going on, any co-ops with some of these big corporations, or do you have any suggestions to people on how to get a foot in the door and maybe to some of these places?
So I won't say there's not anything going on. I mean, that's similar to what we've done with our operation, because we have partnered with ranchers to say, hey, how can we allow some level of hunting access onto these properties?
Mm-hmm.
So we've had some success with that so far. We're hoping we can make that scalable without over commoditizing it. So there's a couple of problems with what you just described. One is liability.
Mm-hmm.
You get a big corporation involved, and there are some monsters, and suddenly you got the liability problem.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's way better for them to let some employees hunt or some corporate muckety mucks hunt or no one hunt than it is to allow you or me to give them $500 to hunt a Saturday.
Right.
Yep.
Because the risk is so great. We live in a litigious society. So how do you get past that? I think the way to get past that is you have to be liked, known, and trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think the days of cold calling work anymore, particularly in Florida, because of the carpetbagging. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to steal from an old term,
Right.
no one's from here. So you knock on a door and you seem like a nice guy, but at the end of the day, everyone's always looking for an angle.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to exploit this and make money off of them and make them look bad and put them at risk? So there's a trust problem there that is not easily fixed without some serious runtime, which is a thing that personally I've been working on for a long time. Over the years, you hear, if you went into conservation circles, like on the fisheries side, it doesn't take long before you start hearing sugar get demonized. U.S. Sugar, Florida Crystals. Man, those are pretty good organizations run by pretty smart people that care about Florida. Yeah, they want to make money off their crops. Guess what they plant? They plant rice as a recharge or a cover crop in between sugarcane planting.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what's loaded in those rice fields?
Right.
Blue-winged teal and blackbellies. So how can we work with some of those guys? Those guys show up and hunt. They're standing in line next to you at the STAs. They're regular folks, and they want to do a good job, and they don't want to damage the environment, but their job is to work this crop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's we have to change kind of our expectations, but also we have to be better at creating community, because community is where that liked, known, and trusted stuff happens.
For sure.
I didn't just walk up to a cattle rancher and say, hey, will you let me duck hunt here? We got to know each other over years
Mm-hmm.
before, I started running hunts on his properties. And the other side of all of this, though, is a little bit of our own problem. And I say this as a guy that makes most of my money off hunting ducks. And that is we've commoditized a public resource.
Mm-hmm.
And ducks are a public resource. We've commoditized it so we can make money off of it. I want to make money, right? Duck season's coming. I'm booking hunts right now. I want to book out my season because that's how I pay my bills. At the same time, how do we the average duck hunt in Florida today on private land is going for about $350 to $400.
Gotcha.
That's excessive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's outlandish in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So we capped our hunts at $200.
That's good.
Now, I'm not doing that judgmentally, because we can make up for it on volume.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can run more hunters. If you can only run 10 hunters and the only way you can make the numbers work is to charge $425 a day,
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Like, that's what you got to do. But heck, man, that's what I paid for shooting flooded timber in Arkansas. That's
Right.
what I paid for, like, with lodging. Like, so I struggle with that, because I recognize needing to make money, wanting to make money, the commoditization of this public resource, but also there's got to be a balance in there somewhere that if I isolate it too much, the only people that get to experience this then are the ones that can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts a cap on how many people get to experience it,
Mm-hmm.
which in my mind puts a cap on conservation. It puts a cap on hunter recruitment. It puts a cap on, like, if I'm thinking long term, I'm not going to be around in 50 years, but if I'm thinking 50 years from now, who's going to be running this duck hunting operation? We're dang sure going to need some more clients to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where are they going to come from if we limit this to only, if I charged $500 a day, I guarantee you I could find 10 guys to pay that every Saturday.
Right.
Logistically, it makes my life way easier, but it also responsibly is probably not the wisest thing to do from a long-term effects of hunting as conservation in my state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a balance that I kind of look at that through that lens. And again, I'm not condemning anybody that doesn't, but I wish more people did, because I think there's a responsibility that comes with that also lends itself to, if Matt was on this podcast with me, my rancher, my partner, my buddy, he would tell you how unique it is to see these people that would never come through a gate experiencing his properties.
That's pretty cool.
He's out there. So, I don't have a traditional lease. I have a handshake.
Yeah.
We don't have anything in writing. And that's how he does business, and that's how I like to do business. And he's out there with me on Saturday morning cooking sausage so that when people get done hunting, they can stand around and talk about cows and deer and panthers and tortoises. And he'll put them in the truck and go cart them around and show them alligators and spoonbills. And that's special that we get to do that. And that was a long way, Tony, of saying, I think to solve the problem of how much land we have and how little access we have in Florida, we've got to be creative in building those relationships with those landowners and those corporations and showing them some of the ancillary benefits of having hunters on the landscape, be it revenue stream driven by having hunting concessions, but also the stories that people tell. Like, there's not a person that came through our operation last year. I'm going to make this number up, but I'll say we had 500 individuals come through our hunts last year. There's not an individual that came through that's going to go back and say, man, cattle ranching's bad for the state of Florida.
Right.
That PR campaign is of some value to the ranching community.
For sure. That's a good point.
I don't know necessarily how to quantify that, but I know that Matt would tell you that's a pretty big deal, because he's able to stand out there and talk to these guys day after day after day. And I think some of those softer things are some of the stuff that we have to convince some of these landowners of, in conjunction with revenue streams.
Yep.
So it's not just I'm not saying open your land and let us do this for free, but can we come to some sort of compromise in there somewhere where also, Sugar, you've been demonized, but if you would allow us to do some wounded warrior hunts out here, or some youth hunts out here, or we're doing a partnership with Delta Waterfowl and University of Florida on their grad students in their hunting ecology program, or their wildlife ecology program, where we're taking them on a hunt on this ranch.
That's awesome.
If we could do some of those types of things, insurance is easy. We can solve that problem. That's
Right.
$1.
Right.
We can solve that problem. If you'll give us the chance, but you've got to trust us to do it. And so it's a heavy lift. You don't just build that relationship in a day or 3. And that's where I think we all get sideways, is used to you built that relationship because you were a nice guy that knocked on my door and wants to shoot my deer.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I need somebody to mow my back 50 acres. So if you'll run a tractor for a couple of days, I'll let you go take a couple of deer out. That trade-off isn't there anymore. We've got to change the economy of that trade.
Makes sense. That's a great. I'm really proud of myself for asking this question, because I mean it, because it's such a drastic difference, in a different part of the world.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to gain that success, it's something that you're going to have to look at a little bit differently when you come down here to the Sunshine State.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge that waterfowlers, as addicted as we are, I think we're all up for the challenge. And I'm excited to see what people like you and hopefully the people that we can become, to help support those types of things, because again, it all goes back to the resource first, and then populating that, So,
and Travis, with off Florida, I noticed on there that there's a lot of different. It seemed like probably 8 or 10 different options on how people can help, get involved as a member. And what would you suggest for some of the you can walk people through more, but for some of the memberships, it's kind of expected to get involved and be in the state and kind of help with these organizations. But for guys, if somebody's tuning into this from Arkansas or Minnesota or wherever it is, and they just want to get in on a membership level, obviously they won't be able to attend much, but what would you suggest for those people, and then also for in-state people?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because we did something super different with All Florida. You guys are familiar with spraying lakes because you've had some Florida familiarity. You lived in Florida. Like, spraying lakes is the biggest topic really in water quality conservation. Like, that's a hot topic in Florida.
Man.
Yeah.
And so used to, Travis was pretty anti-spray. I would stand up and yell at scientists at meetings and say, "You're killing our lakes, you're nuking our lakes." And then I started to have some conversations and listen to what people were saying to me, and determined pretty quickly that they've got a whole lot of science behind what they're doing.
Mm.
That's not to say I want them to go wipe out hydrilla on a lake. Hydrilla is an invasive plant. I recognize that. But it does provide a food value for ducks and a habitat for bass and a nursery for brim. So through our podcast, we rallied people to go to these spray meetings about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up with 84 people was the number that went to spray meetings around the state.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I went to a meeting and stood up and said, "You know what? We were wrong on spraying. We want to work with the state. Like, we still want to have influence, but we're not going to say you have to stop spraying, because that's crazy."
Mm-hmm.
So we earned some respect and some trust doing that. But what I learned was there's a lot of people out there that want to engage and they don't know how to.
Mm-hmm.
It's intimidating to get in your car and drive for an hour and a half and walk into a meeting that's like in a formal courtroom type setting or boardroom type setting.
Yeah.
And then you're given 2 minutes or 3 minutes with lights on a podium that are going to go off, and you're getting cut off if you haven't made your thoughts. And maybe you're nervous about speaking in front of people anyway. You haven't done it since high school. That's a pretty common public fear.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've always tried to do is equip our people to be informed, to speak from a position of being informed about conservation topics in Florida. I'm not going to tell you what you need to think about spraying, but I'm going to tell you a lot about science about it, and I'm going to go show up. And I'm going to talk about what I think about, but you can go learn. I'm going to put the cookies on the bottom shelf, so to speak. So yes, the question about all Florida, one of the things we did that I felt was super disruptive and super creative was we created a $5 participating member. Mm-hmm. And the idea there was I didn't ever want this to be, I'll pick on Ducks Unlimited because I'm a Ducks Unlimited member. I love Ducks Unlimited. I've always been a DU guy. I didn't want it to be where it was only the elites that were able to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And being a Ducks Unlimited member, $35 isn't that much money.
Right.
I think that's what it is now for the base.
Yep.
But at the same time, I know some people that have hunted with me over the years and scratched and scraped together pennies. Or we did a program a few years ago where if you'd never hunted before, we would take you hunting for free.
That's cool.
We did a program a couple of years ago where we would take teachers hunting for free.
Wow.
That's cool.
So if you were a school teacher, we didn't care what you taught. We would take you. And if you didn't want to hunt, if you didn't want a gun, if you didn't want to shoot, we would just take you on an eco tour.
Wow.
And we ended up and we bought you a duck stamp. So we bought 80 some odd duck stamps, gave them away to these teachers, took them out on tours. So the idea was, from a membership standpoint, if someone wants to be affiliated with us and be a member, for $5 they can do it.
That's
what
awesome.
We ask is they show up at some kind of meeting once a year. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have to be FWC. It could be a county commission. It could be anti-development. It could be, a city commission. It could be a water quality thing. Like, there's tons of public hearings all over the state every freaking day. Mm-hmm. Just go to one. You don't have to speak. Just go to one. And then we've given some other criteria like share social media posts and things like that. Like, we're going to kind of deputize you guys to help be our social media force. But the idea there was we wanted it so that if anyone wanted to be part of our organization, $5 they could be a member. There was no dollar blockade from it, because I've been there before where I'm a member of a bunch of organizations now, but I have been there before where, okay, Delta, Ducks, NWTF, SCI, CCA, like $35 times 5, that's $165. It's not insignificant to me some years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all good organizations. So I just wanted people to be able to be on the team if they want. Beyond that, we get it all the regular members, the $35, the $100, the $250, and there's different things you get. Just like all the other NGOs out there give you stuff. But the thing I was most proud of is that we came up with that idea of the participating members so that people could join and be part of our team for a really low lift. And very candidly, guys, we're not going to go check and see if they attended a meeting. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the honor system. We just wanted to give them the opportunity to say, hey, yeah, I believe in this thing. And you would be surprised. We've had some stories already behind the scenes of people that reached out and said, I wasn't sure about a sportsman's organization, which you guys aren't, but I joined for $5 because I love that you encourage people to show up at these meetings. And that's a win, because now you're on my team.
Yeah.
And if you're on my team, we can have a lot more conversations. If it's just like those programs I'm talking about, if I can get a new hunter, if I can get somebody that's never hunted, if I can get a teacher, if I can get an anti-hunter, and we can sit down and have a meal, or we can sit in a boat for a couple hours, probably we're going to get along just fine.
Yeah.
Like, there's very few assholes out there in the world. I'm not saying there's none, but there's very few of them.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if I can sit down and have a conversation, like, I'm a pretty affable guy, I'm a pretty likable guy, I'm a pretty reasonable guy, and I can see your perspectives on you're uncomfortable with killing an animal, or it just makes you sad when you see it, the anthropomorphization of wildlife. And we can have some really in-depth conversations and go down that road, but we can't do that if we can't get together.
Right.
And so how do we get those barriers out of the way to get people on our team is really the end of the day what I'm trying to do, because if we can build a team, we can get some serious stuff done.
Yeah. And man, I love everything about what you're doing. For me and Tony going to other states and stuff, and it's kind of a thing that we're passionate for, is going to different areas to hunt waterfowl and making videos out of it and stuff. And just to have so much of my young life. I mean, we moved to Florida when I was going in my sophomore year. So sophomore to last year, I lived in Florida. I'm 20, going on 26 now. And just Florida has a big place in my heart, just from a lot of different angles. But it's cool to see what you're doing. And, we're going to definitely help champion this campaign you're doing.
Well, we appreciate it, man. Like I said, it's the best we can do right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we think we can do right now. It's the best we can do right now. We're very serious about it. We haven't. You asked earlier what we've done. As all Florida. I don't know if this is as all Florida, although I don't know that you differentiate between that and Cast and Blast and Travis and anything else.
Right.
But we've missed one FWC commission meeting in 5 years.
Wow.
Goodness.
And
that's awesome.
The only reason I missed it is I had a client come in from Minnesota to duck hunt, and he booked before I knew what the days of the meeting were in December. So I canceled for that. But we just our goal is to always show up, and I'm going to show up no matter what. But if we can build out an army of people that are willing to show up, willing to be informed, willing to be part of the broader team, the team that is FWC and DEP and Florida Department of Agriculture, and if we can play at a broader scale and think bigger picture, think beyond just the pawn on the chessboard or the knight on the chessboard, and look at the whole board and think 3, 4, 5, 6 moves in advance, I think we could really change the future of both conservation in Florida and what hunting looks like in Florida.
I love that.
I do too.
And as for people that are not residents and are just maybe they're a state away or whatever, like we are in Georgia, can you go to these meetings? Like, for example, let's say me and Tony are down there duck hunting and we notice that there's a FWC meeting or whatever that on a Monday after we're duck hunting Sunday. If you're a non-resident, can you attend these meetings and have a say on some of this kind of stuff? Or
Oh, absolutely. But again, don't just wrap around the axle of attending like FWC meetings. Like there's water management in Florida is done by water management districts. Like when you guys were in Jacksonville, it was the St. John's Water Management District.
right.
That's everything from the Ocklawaha River. They're talking about removing the dam, the tributaries of the St. John's, the Lake Washington, the Weir, the water levels, Fellsmere Farms, like Lake Helen Blaze. Like there's a bunch of stuff in that water management district where they will have public meetings about access, about hunting, about fishing, about are they going to put a boat ramp in? Are they going to open this and turn it into a WMA? Are they going to allow any kind of use on this property? Are they going to put a hiking trail in? Like that kind of stuff happens constantly all year round and happens all over the state. And your head has to be on a swivel because there's so much of it. I can't tell you how many times I've been like driving to a meeting across the state and someone's like, "Oh, are you coming to this meeting that's, 4.5 hours the other direction on the other coast?" And it's like, yeah, I can't be in two places at one time. And I think they're both important. I think they both have value. So until I don't like mobs, I say this a lot. I think in social media terms, we form mobs a lot. Tony, you mentioned that you're military. I'm a big proponent of armies. Like an army, the difference between an army and a mob is an army is well trained. They're disciplined. They're looking to leaders, not just one leader. They're looking to leaders across whatever their platoons are. And there's a strategy in how an army is deployed and how an army operates. Very different than a mob that shows up with pitchforks. Mobs are never successful in the history of the world. You can go through the Visigoths to now. There's never been a mob that was successful. Maybe in the moment, but not really.
Right.
But armies, SEALs, the like military, like those are very successful, and they're very successful because they're well trained, they're well informed, they're strategic, they're systematic, they're thoughtful. It may not always feel like that when you're in the trenches, but you know exactly what I'm saying, right?
Mhm.
Like they're very tactical about how they go about it. So I tend to think we need to build an army, and I don't mean that as confrontational as it sounds, but I definitely look around at some of the stuff that happens in the conservation world, and I'm thinking, man, this is very mob oriented, very reactionary. We need to be way more tactical, strategic about how we're doing this.
Well, Travis, and here's something I want to say to every listener out there, no matter where you are. You can't tell me, unless you live up north somewhere in a very, very low populated areas. If you live in the majority of the United States, I don't care where you are, and you've lived there for just say 5 years or 10 years, you have watched resources deplete at a rapid level. You have. You might not want to admit it, but if you look back and think about it, I've lived in 3 different states in my life for a significant period. And Florida, y'all, is getting bulldozed by the minute. And I really believe that the strongest push to keeping the bulldozing is the tree market. But it's still, money is outweighing that. And, we saw it in St. Johns County where, what I'm talking about, Travis. Just thousands and thousands of acres. Might not have been waterfowl acres, but it was acres where your gopher tortoises, your deer, your coons, the very rare black
Black squirrel.
the black fox squirrel. These animals, there's no more, bro. I love that I lived in an HOA and they were like, oh, well, you live on this little nature preserve. I'm like, great, 4 squirrels and a copperhead can live here. It's going rapidly. And, Ramsey talked about it too. Yeah. And it's everywhere we live, y'all. And we got to do something about it. We just do. And whether it's us connecting more duck hunters with deer hunters and deer hunters with cattle ranchers and horse ranchers and, us all getting together. I know that's one thing that's a common thing. And I just know this from Mario, talking about the relationships that we have with the cattle ranchers in Florida. It's a big, big deal when it comes to us, DU, the hunters, all that stuff. We got to, like Travis was saying, form those relationships.
You know what, Tony, as you're talking about this too, like you got listeners all around the country. We've been talking heavily about Florida. I say this all the time. Conservation in Florida, I say 2 things a lot. One, this is where the big leagues are because of those pressures with 21.5 million people. So we're the 3rd most populous state in the 22nd largest state. So the 2 that have more people are like the second, Texas is 2nd and California's 3rd largest, maybe 4th, something like that. They're much bigger in land than we are. We have the same population as if you combined North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado.
Wow. That's perspective.
You can combine all those states' populations together and you have our population in one state that is smaller than any of those states except the 2 Dakotas.
That's crazy.
It is insane when you think about that. So I say this all the time, and I don't mean it arrogantly, but I say, like, this is conservation in the big leagues. Like, I love the guys from Bozeman, the meat eaters and the groups like that. But at the end of the day, dude, you're in a state with 1 million people. I got 1 million people in my county.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're in a state with 1 million people that's the 2nd or 3rd largest state, and 250,000 of them, 25% of them have hunting licenses, and probably another 10% are married to people with hunting licenses. Like, it's a pretty pro hunting state. And I hear you guys talk, not you guys, but those guys talk about growth, what we're seeing growth wise in Montana. And I'm saying, dude, y'all don't even understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Florida is the model for what you're discussing. So if you want to see how this song ends, you can look at Florida. Yeah. And I'm not done. I'm not giving up. Look at Tennessee, the growth that Tennessee has experienced since COVID. You know, as people are moving, there's no state income tax there. It's very similar to Florida. It's got a good climate. It's got good schools. It's got good metropolitan areas like Nashville and Knoxville, and people are flocking to Tennessee at an alarming rate. Tennessee is going to be like Florida. Like we're going to see a shift away from consumptive use to mutualistic use as a public view, even though we're going to have elected officials that were the same elected officials we had when we had a lot of hunters. And we're not going to understand what happened. And hunters aren't going to have the same relevancy on the landscape that they once had if we're not careful. And I would beseech your listeners to pay attention to what's happening in Florida. Like this stuff we're talking about, sometimes it may get boring. We get in the weeds on numbers and things. But at the end of the day, it's coming to your state. They're not building any more real estate. And the southeastern United States is growing. Montana, the Pacific Northwest, that stuff's blowing up as you see the migration out of California into Idaho and Montana. Like, you guys need to open your eyes and look at Florida, because what we've seen happen here is coming to a theater near you.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I'll just bring up this one public area. I want to talk about a one that hit home with me. You know it very well. Used to be one of the most sought after areas in the state of Florida for public land, and that's Guana River.
Yep.
Sorry, Florida hunters, we're going to talk about it, because if we don't, we're not going to have it. And I just had to bring this up, Travis. So a couple of years ago, they were trying to take the northern end of that.
For development.
Yep, for development. And it's already, folks, a place that used to be a Class A waterfowl spot that has already got decks at your back in some areas of that place when you're hunting. So you're already seeing houses. You're already hunting where you're hearing the waves crash. That, when I saw that happen, like right almost underneath my feet, that was an alarm to me. You know, and it made me just kind of go, gosh damn, I got to do something about this, because, you know, if you wait until it's too late, it's going to be too late.
Yep. If we wait for somebody else to do it, it's going to be too late.
We were talking about Guana, how that almost, all that almost happened, you know?
Yeah. And it only didn't happen because there was a 3-year hold placed on the development. And if the state doesn't acquire that land, or the feds don't acquire, if somebody doesn't acquire that land, I would guess it's still going to happen.
Yeah.
I would guess it's still going to get developed on that north end when that plus the property value has just gone through the roof in the 3 years.
Yep.
And unless we show up in mass and stand up and put our foot down, and again, not to get too political, but we say this all the time, don't New York my Florida. Like, we don't want people moving here and voting like they did other states. But at the end of the day, like, all of our pro-growth policies come from Republicans. Like, we tend to give them a pass because they're not the ones that are, like, they're in a dogfight for an election. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of like over giving a pass for both sides of this conversation, because frankly, they're the ones that are interested in developing every inch of my state as much as anybody else is.
True.
And I'm not anti-growth, but I am responsible growth. I'm pro-responsible growth. And it seems like we have just checked that at the door and sailed on past it. And I get myself in trouble politically a lot with this stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm just kind of over it, because I'll look around and I'm like, I don't know who to vote for, because this guy over here is pro-guns, but he's going to bulldoze every square inch of the state. This guy over here is anti-guns and is also going to bulldoze every square inch of the state. So I guess it comes down to guns or, you know, education or whatever your other issue is. But it's very frustrating to me as a conservation guy, because I don't know who's coming over that hill. And that's something we work really hard on behind the scenes, is trying to develop relationships with some of these politicians and elected officials so that we can have some influence to, if not stop it, slow it down, have some considerations given, have some strategy to it.
For sure.
You know, push a little bit in our direction.
Yep.
For sure. Well, man, I would love to sit here and just keep talking all night, Travis, but man, we want to be respectful for your time, man, and it's been a wealth of knowledge for us, and I think a lot of our listeners too, just because a lot of people that listen are probably from Florida, but we hunt in a lot of different states, like we were talking about earlier. So I think it's been a good thing for everybody that listens to this to kind of have some knowledge on what's going down in Florida. So,
well, I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you so much. I like I said, enjoy the show. Looking forward to listening.
I appreciate it so
Thank
much,
you,
man.
and keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing, man. It's humbling, and I appreciate it so much, and I'm definitely committed myself to doing more. That's just part of being an older guy, I guess, but it's definitely, I'm excited about it.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank y'all so much.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.
Southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.